This week's topic is the research problem. And so I just wanted to cover some of the main points from chapter 3. There are also some other videos that I'll have you watch that also do a good job of sort of explaining this and narrowing it down. So one of the biggest things that you may be thinking of is like, I have some ideas for research, but I'm not 100% sure. I sort of want to go in this direction, but I need to, clarify what that is. And so just remember that this is a process of creating a research question. So this chapter describes like where we get research problems, what is a research problem, and helps you develop a research problem list. It'll also help you identify what the research problem is that you're going to study, sort of defining that, and then developing a research question, a hypothesis, or a null hypothesis. So why do we need to identify a research problem? So, we really, are looking to do research to solve unanswered questions, to add more knowledge base to the dental hygiene literature. And so really figuring out sort of what is the question or what is the problem that I want to study is important, and is something that doesn't always come like immediately. A lot of times you have to talk these things through, or you have to do some digging in the literature. And the reason you need to identify a research problem is because you could write about a topic for days and days and days and, not really answer a question. And so doing an actual original research project, you need to start out with a very defined problem. And so it's really important to be able to focus in on that, so you're not wasting time, or you're not getting frustrated or being confused about sort of the direction that you're going. So the process of thinking about a research problem, and I know some of you have already thought about these things. One would be that, it may be something that you've read about, it may be something you've experienced in your own work, in your own clinical practice, or it could just be an interest that you have. You can replicate other studies. So if you read a study that maybe was done in one place or with a small number of patients, or a small number of students, you can, replicate that, and it may come out with the same result, but it may come out with a different result, sort of depending on the topic and the findings and the methods that you use. It's important to know sort of what is the existing knowledge. And so as we start to narrow this down, you're going to, through the literature review process this semester, you're going to become an expert in the existing knowledge about the topic. And your research question might change from what you sort of work on in this week's module and continue. And after your literature review, you may change some parameters of your research question. But really what we're looking for is something that needs resolved. We need to know about something that needs improved or modified. And, anything that sort of you are curious about. Now, I say anything, but I also want you to think about being realistic about, your research problem. So this is sort of areas of where you might get a research topic. So other studies, personal interests, your own clinical observation, from reading literature reviews, those types of things, from having conversations with a mentor or your advisor. When we talk about, developing a research problem, I'm going to have you write down some lists of things that you'd like to study or things that you have questions about. It can be lengthy. And so sometimes, we need to, really focus in on what is the question that we want to answer, and having a very clear goal. So in order to identify a research problem, you really want to ask yourself, what is the question that's to be answered? So a lot of you, we've had conversations about, oh, I'm interested in a certain topic. I'm interested in tooth whitening. I'm interested in this. But really, what is the question that you want to answer? And so think about, what could be done, or what approach should be taken to improve it. What do we already know about the topic or the problem? What do we not know? And what information might be needed in order to improve the problem. So we really want to sort of narrow the focus. We'll start broad, sort of a topic, and then become more specific. A lot of times that's maybe a problem statement, a question, aims and purposes, and objectives. And so we'll talk a little bit more about these as we move along, and particularly the objectives are more related to your methods. And so here's, again, similar research problems can be found in a lot of different places. You really want to think about the need for the study. So, one of the things that happens sometimes is graduate students will come up with an idea or a problem. And once they dig into the literature, they see like, maybe we've already answered that question, but there might be a little different direction or some additional work that needs to be done related to that area. And sometimes that's a great way to move forward on an actual research project or research question. You also want to think about the reality of cost, the amount of time you want to spend. You don't want to have a project that's going to take you 5 years to collect the data because you'd like to probably graduate before then. And so you want to think about sort of a realistic project also. I will say that one of the things is that if you align yourself with maybe some of the research interests of the faculty in your program, that's even more helpful. And you'll probably have a more positive experience if you align yourself with some of the areas that your faculty already do research in, because they'll be able to better help you. They'll be able to quickly provide you resources and things like that. And so that's one thing to consider also. Your study doesn't always have to be an original work. It could be a replicated work. So I had a student recently who read a study about an intra-professional experience at a dental school between dental and dental hygiene students. That study was only done at one dental school. And so we decided to replicate that at our dental school. And so that's what that student did for their master's thesis. And so, we found some similar results, some different results, but overall kind of the same results. And so that sort of, provided additional support for the results that the first study found. And we replicated it almost exactly. So a good research question is one that can be answered using some type of observable data. It includes, sort of the relationship between two or more variables if it is a quantitative study, something that makes sense, right? It's logical. And so those are the things you want to think about when you think about a good research question. Some of the ways that you could frame a research question would be a hypothesis or a null hypothesis. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in the quantitative research methods section and stats. But basically a hypothesis, I'm sure you're all familiar. Basically, you're going to say that, treatment X reduces bacteria more than treatment Y. And so that's sort of a hypothesis. A null hypothesis basically would say that there's no difference between treatment X and treatment Y. And then a lot of times, sometimes our work doesn't quite fit into this like hypothesis, null hypothesis, and you're really just writing a research question. So what is the relationship between, emotional intelligence and professional students year in the program or something like that. And so a research question can also be an appropriate thing to do. So for my dissertation, we didn't have a hypothesis and a null hypothesis. We had research questions that we were answering. And so because the type of questions and the type of project I was doing really didn't lend itself to the hypothesis, null hypothesis sort of framework. So as you think about your research questions, as you think about developing that, I look forward to talking with you all about your interests and your research thoughts. And just remember that, we want you to do something realistic. We want you to do something that's feasible for either where you're located or the resources that you have access to. And we're here to help you do those things. And so we're helping you to either provide resources, provide guidance, so you're not in this alone. But I look forward to getting to know what your research interests are and reading your research problems and questions.